brand strategy needs to have 3 C's. We talk about clarity, we talk about consistency, and we talk about confidence.
In this episode of Deal Sorcery, we are joined by Joanne Verkuylen, founder of Middle M Creative, a full-service marketing agency for private equity firms and investment banks. It's reported that private equity firms see less than 20% of all of the relevant deals in the market in a given year. And Joanne works with her clients to increase that number through brand positioning, to outreach strategies, to founder engagement.
This is a business of relationships. How are we staying in touch with all of those relationships that you're trying to generate deeper relationships with? What's that strategy look like? But we got to be really careful and really deliberate about when, how to use it, and what tech to use it with to understand when to actually pick up the phone then as well.
In this episode, we're talking best practices for marketing in private equity and how the best firms are using marketing to their advantage, helping them see more deals, win more deals, and break through the noise in a crowded market. This is Deal Sorcery.
Joanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. So happy to be here.
I know you have a tremendous background in, marketing, business development inside of private equity, but can you just give us like the Reader's Digest on like yourself, your background, and in particular Middle M, and like what the pitch is for Middle M today?
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a nutshell, like I'm basically a reformed investment banker turned marketer, turned entrepreneur, and saw really the opportunity to create a dedicated agency to the middle market private equity investment banking landscape, and started Middle M in 2018. Have been completely enjoying it ever since.
Excited to take the conversation in a lot of directions, but maybe to kind of set the stage, could you give us a lay of the land of marketing within the private equity industry? How much are firms paying attention to their marketing? How much more needs to be done? Things like that.
I think and when I said, 2018 as the founding year of Middle M, I will say also that kind of really aligned well, I think, to not only just the proliferation of the industry, but also a turning of tides as it relates to BD activities, which of course then lends itself so naturally to the question of the role marketing should play in this space. And I will say that the investment banking community, I think, more led the charge on the marketing side. And now PE is quickly realizing that they also need to follow suit and create marketing strategies that support not only the BD function, but also just general brand awareness for these firms, especially as you think about the competition of, putting money to work. And I will say, when we founded Middle M, we created a mission statement for the firm itself that you will not find in any other agency. I'm pretty much guaranteed on that, which is that we help our clients enable better deal flow. So we are 100% focused on how marketing strategies can impact our clients' deal flow, which is one of the biggest pain points, as we all know, for private equity and as well, of course, investment banking firms. And so as well, we decided early on to also be full service. So if you think about the range of elements that a firm can use, tools in the tool bag from the standpoint of marketing strategies, we are best in class on each one of those elements. So we're hyper-focused in our sector, but we're full service as it relates to the types of strategies we can deploy. But going back to your question, I will say that again, because of sort of the change in the landscape, and as these firms become more and more mature, and again, realizing the need for marketing as it relates to their strategy, we have, I think, hit the market timing perfectly. We always talk about, as it relates to marketing strategies, those that need to be as aligned as possible to the firm's strategy, and as well natural. And if you think about brand positioning and differentiation, and then as well, how is that messaging communicated? All of that needs to really stem to that firm's strategy overall, and their culture, and how they work with their portfolio companies, how they source their deals. So we're always thinking about the elements. And so if they're mainly proprietary deal origination, or if they're getting most of their deals from intermediary relationships, those are like primary and first level questions we have to think about then the marketing strategies that those firms can then deploy.
It's interesting, right? It sounds like it's much more of a pitch about performance marketing than anything else. I don't know if that's the right term, but at least that's the way I'm kind of thinking about it.
I would think of it more as brand marketing. And we can talk about where those case studies come out, but it's really awareness, brand awareness building. There's so many layers to that and ways to enhance a firm's reputation, clarity to the market as it relates to the types of investments that they're looking for. I mean, I think one of the biggest, and I know that this data is passed around a lot in this industry, but it's something between like 82 and 80% of the time, firms will not see deals in their wheelhouse. And so for me, that is like such a red flag and a way for, and one of the solutions could be, right, ensuring that your messaging and your approach to the market and how you are thinking about your BD aspects, right, to ensure that that number gets reduced and you start seeing deals that are in your wheelhouse that make sense for you.
Is that a percentage of bank deals?
Yes, that's an intermediary number. Yes.
Where firms are not seeing 80% of the deals they should.
That's from Sutton Place Strategies, that firm that tracks that and enables you to see overall like the metadata that they produce. But that number has gone up. You would think it would have gone down. And I think it's gone up because I think most likely, right, deal mechanics are becoming more and more like targeted. And so they're not going after 300 maybe for, companies, but for financial and strategic buyers. And I'm talking about intermediaries representing a company. So it may be they're more narrow focused, marketing outreaches that they have on behalf of their clients that then equate to, I didn't see that deal. And so they call up their investment banker relationship at that firm and say, why didn't we see that deal? And there's probably a myriad of answers, but we help try to bridge that gap of enabling, relationship driven, of course, that will never change, relationship driven activity in using marketing to enhance, support, make consistent that connection.
So how do you draw a box today around the set of services that Middle M offers? And like, what are those buckets?
So it's really everything from, brand strategy. We have a very in-depth process that we call Brand 360 that enables us to help a firm truly identify how they are thought of in the market, and that's broken down by key constituency, so founders, intermediaries, et cetera, all the way down to and then what does that mean, right? What are our recommendations for how you should be positioning yourself best in the market based on how you're thought of both internally and externally, which is why it's a Brand 360. But we do a lot of PR as well, strategic level PR. So if you think about how firms get their next deal, typically, and this is true for investment bankers as well, like being very thoughtful and smart about how you're marketing against your portfolio, your platform type acquisitions, as well as add-ons that help seed the next, layer of conversations. PR plays a big role there. So brand, strategic PR, we do a lot of email, social marketing. We do a lot of lead gen, so how we can use tech, like almost digital marketing as it relates to outreach and signifying, quote unquote buyer behavior or prospect behavior, all the way down to CRM, cleanup dashboards that could enable them to better, think about their market. We do some video. Really, like I said, we really try to be as full service as possible. We also do websites, branding, brand look and feel, logo development, of course, those types of things.
The one-stop marketing shop for private equity. I love
Full
it.
service.
Exactly. And investment banking firms.
Love to see it. What about how this has evolved over time, both in investment banking? We are primarily talking about private equity firms, but how did this look 10 years ago compared to what it looks like today?
I think 10 years ago, first of all, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have the number of firms that exist today. You will have probably, whatever percentage 10 years ago, but I don't think marketing was really even on the radar. Neither was BD for that, for all intents and purposes either 10 years ago. I think with the proliferation, just the increased competition, again, deal flow being now one of the key pain points, putting money to work in an efficient way really has become such, a key pain point. Of course, raising capital, I'm not even focused on the IR side of things and what a private equity firm needs to do to be successful, but like putting their money to work. Okay, they've raised a fund. So how are you going to find the right deals? It's like the right deals. And like that is, and so all of the things that go into that, I don't think that was happening 10 years ago, like at all at the private equity level. There was a relationship building, and there was, of course, figuring out the relationships between the intermediaries and the private equity firms and like what that meant for a private equity firm. Because it used to be back in the day, and this maybe goes back a little bit longer than 10 years, private equity firms held all the power. They held all the power. They had the money. And so if you were an investment banker, you were you were, praying to the gods of those types of firms to provide capital, whatever it is, invest in or acquire the company you were representing. Now that's flopped. That's changed in that it's so much more of a relationship quid pro quo type situation. And private equity sees the true need of what the investment bankers provide. And then as well, you have the proprietary outreach, which 10 years ago, that was probably happening more. I don't have the data on that, but certainly that idea and that strategy has taken more shape by several types of firms, right? That then invest heavily on the BD side of things, where they're picking up and cold calling, or they're emailing, and they have a process associated with outreach to prospects, founder-owned companies. And so that has probably over the past 10 years has gotten much more strategic and more organized and more efficient for those firms.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? Like outside in, I think a lot of people don't realize how much it truly has evolved in the last decade, right? Like I was looking at some of the data last week. The real number, I'd been quoting 10% growth, but it's actually 15.5% CAGR over the last decade in terms of assets under management in private equity.
In the United States, that's crazy. I mean, that makes sense.
And especially when you compare that with the growth of private businesses, because private businesses in the US are growing at it was like a 2.3 or 2.5% CAGR over the last decade, where private equity AUM is at a 15.5% CAGR, right? And it's just like that delta, I mean, it explains truly, right? Like the amount of competition that's happening in the space, and like why the number one, like, and I've been hearing it every week, the number one concern of LPs today, right, when they're talking to GPs and talking to private equity firms about potentially investing in them, is how are you going to deploy this capital, right?
Well, and some firms are leading with that as their element of differentiation. This is our process, and this is for that specific constituency. So yes, no, total, that makes, complete sense. And so how can you, as an investor, how can you repeat your past returns if your process is muddled or doesn't make sense in light of these new conditions? So marketing, again, if you think of BD as just a funnel, right? Very simplistically, and marketing sits at the top of the funnel. That's about awareness. That's about consideration. That's about all of the places that your prospects or investment banks will be looking and seeing your activity. And that's where you need to be in order for the BD function to be more efficient and successful.
So with this, as we're talking about proliferation of capital, we've talked a little bit about the evolution of marketing within private equity today. Like, do you have a sense for how pervasive marketing is today? Like, do most firms have marketing in-house or not? Like, I don't know. Would you have a good perspective on that?
When we look at the number of firms that are out there, first of all, we have inbound BD coming to us as a firm, right? And that speaks strongly to, I'd like to think we have a strong brand, and we do, and people are recommending us, but it's also they're seeking out solutions because they know. And it's, whereas even 5-7 years ago, when you ask maybe a firm, where's your marketing? They'll point to their website. And that's just not what we're talking about when we're talking about marketing for PE. Of course, that's a housing, place for your brand and your messaging, and it's important, but it's not marketing as it relates to like actionable initiatives. And so, all firms have a website, right? So of course they're investing some money towards that. And of course they probably hired an outside firm or whatever to do that for them, but that's it. And they kind of put a bow on it and say, our marketing is done. The smarter firms and the firms that are being more innovative are investing more and more. We have one client in particular really investing behind their transactional announcements, right? So if you think about buy and build strategies, which are very prominent in today's market, how can you help seed future, almost inbound opportunities? And PR plays a big role there. So, firms are seeing that. They're seeing their competition in various media publications with whether it's a press release or whether it's a thought leadership piece, which we do a lot of for our clients as well, that further enhance the brand, further enhance the particulars of what that firm does and does well, that speak again to intermediaries, their prospects on the business side. And so I would, I think it's growing. I don't have a specific percentage, but I will tell you that most of the firms that we talk to are firms that have some level of BD function. I will say, it's less likely that we're talking to a firm that just does investing. Like there's mostly, usually a BD person or a function installed, but not like a marketing person necessarily. Sometimes the larger firms do have that.
It's interesting, right? The overarching theme to me here is just the kind of evolution of and maturation, I guess I should say, of private equity, right? Because exactly to your point, like you flash back 10 to 15 years ago and you hang a shingle and you've got a fund, you talk to some investment bankers, everybody has deals, everybody's fat and happy, no big deal, right? But the thing that stands out to me is like we're going through this massive shift right now in private equity from a place where you could do that and just hang the shingle and you got deals done to the place where you have to have a go-to-market strategy, right?
Yes,
and you have to actually put together the team around it and execute on it. And it's funny, like some of the data that Matt and I look at seems to exemplify this as well, which is you're just talking about like the people you end up working with end up being the ones that typically have some sort of BD professional in there, right? So when we look at the data, I think, Accenture said last year there was 12,000 private equity firms, but I've got a bunch of other data points that point to it's actually closer to like 5,000 to 6,000, like 5,500 private equity firms, right? And the data we have is saying that there's only 400 of those firms that have dedicated business development professionals, right? And the thing that's an interesting thought exercise for me is like, if you were to go to any one of our private equity, collective clients, right, and say to them, hey, it looks like only 8% of your portfolio has sales and marketing people in it, right? I think the immediate reaction would be like, what? Like, we are way off the rails here, right? Like something is wrong. And the funny thing is, like in private equity, that's the norm, is that, the vast majority of folks do not have dedicated go-to-market function professionals, and the majority of sales and marketing best practices have not yet been adopted.
No, there is such a huge opportunity as it relates to our business tapping into that growth, because I really do truly believe that it's, and I would like to matrix out those 400 that have BD to AUM, like in comparison to everybody else. Because of course, it's just that being smart about where you're making an investment as a private equity firm is so key to the future of, how you're spending your time and your resources in order to get the next 10 deals, the next 20 deals. And I bet that there's a strong link to the success, growth, AUM of those firms that have the BD function, and then as well leaning into more marketing tactics and seeing the benefits thereof. And you've seen some of the firms out there do like really creative videos or really creative like podcasts and things like that. What we always tend to like focus on is just the day in, day out, always strategizing on how we're being in front of the right people from the standpoint of whatever strategy makes sense for our clients.
I'm curious, like, just to further understand the current landscape and how folks in the industry are thinking about this, can you talk about some of the inbound clients that you get? What's like the typical ask that they have? And are you having to convince them otherwise? Or are they coming like, we know what we need to do and we just want you to help?
If we think about our own BD and what comes in over the transom, a lot of times it is firms that are referred to us, right? And a lot of times it's, you see our name because of Middle M and with the work we're doing on the PR side of things or whatnot. But firms that may just be searching online for a firm, like a lot of times it's we need a new website, or we need, or we're interested in creating some video. Well, we always need to scratch it below the surface a little bit more, understand truly what their strategy is. What are the pain points that they're experiencing that and so in contemplation of all the tools that we can pull out that would be more efficient to accomplish what their goals are. So we're always starting with their strategy and always trying to ask those more challenging questions. And sometimes they're just wanting a website proposal and quote, and that's fine. And we will certainly do those things. But where we see the rubber, like where we see really the ROI and the rubber meeting the road is in those, day in, day out things that we can be doing, whether it's on LinkedIn or whether it's on their website in terms of, or whether it's through media partners where we're, again, doing something about where they're seeing their like investment themes really pay off in a certain sector, or and that getting picked up in a media outlet. And so they're, getting inbounds on that. We had a client who was interested in doing thought leadership, and they're specifically in a very specific sector, and so it was really easy to generate all these like really creative ideas for them in terms of like thought leadership, and it resulted in inbound for them, like conversations that they would not have had, whether it's a business owner or another intermediary in Des Moines, Iowa, that they wouldn't have known otherwise. So, and that had the right next deal for them. That's the kind of work that really gets us excited. Website work and design, that's fun, it's creative, but we love like really where we can help on the BD side of things for our clients.
Joanne, we'd love to hear some examples. Maybe you could walk us through a case study where you've worked with a client and how it went.
I would love to. Yes. We've been working with one particular private equity firm that has grown significantly over the past 5 years. We've been working with them since before COVID. And we helped them originally with their brand positioning. We did a brand 360 for them, as I kind of alluded to earlier. We helped them with all of their messaging and optics, and then turned into a marketing strategy for them. And we really have dedicated the strategy towards like really doubling down on PR for them. And so with respect to any platform investment they make, with respect to any buy and build, whether it's an add-on for one of their portfolio companies, we try to get as much mileage out of those announcements as we can. So for that particular private equity firm, it's really incredible to see the growth. They just closed, I want to say like a $2.7 billion, like their next fund was almost $3 billion. And they're middle market focused, lower middle market type companies they're investing in, mom and pop type businesses. And they do have one BD professional. It's not a team, it's a professional mainly. And so we partner with him mainly, and, doing things like year-end reviews and LinkedIn posts and thought leadership, again, thought leadership actually in particular to ensure that their intermediary relationships really understand their investment considerations. So that's always a key element of our strategy, and ensuring that circle is connected all the way around. And so, that partnership continues to grow to this day. So we're really proud of. That's just I wouldn't call it like, it's a like meat and potatoes for us. We get such joy out of working with firms like that, where they continue to grow. They're building their next, fundraising for their next fund, and we're along for the ride. We are, for them, their marketing department. So that's another, I think, thing that we stress as an agency and as a firm in our partnership, is that we all know how particular and how dedicated to excellence this industry is. We stay in lockstep with that. But more importantly, we really try to ensure that our clients feel we are turnkey, like we are as professional and as, and so there's a lot of trust that's built in our client relationships. And that's something that I personally, as the founder of this company, am very, very proud of. Our team is just absolutely fantastic and very thoughtful as to how we deliver against the client deliverables and ensure our clients always feel supported. They trust us. there's a turnkey so that we can just get it done for them with as minimal disruption on their end as possible. So that's where we have found success.
I want to shift the conversation for a minute to talk about, you've talked about how much you guys help private equity firms with dialing in their marketing and their messaging and their sourcing activities toward founders. And so my question for you guys is, we think about what's inside the founder's head, right? Like, in your experience, like what are those drivers for founders when they're thinking about, a transaction and kind of picking the private equity firms that they want to work with?
My God, we could talk for the next 3 hours on this. The reason why I can speak to this so deeply is because of all of this brand research that we do. And so, if you accumulate all of those conversations we've had with portfolio company owners or founders of these companies over the years, it aggregates into this incredible picture of like why they choose the private equity firm they end up going with. And it's, of course, putting valuation aside, things like that. What was going through their thought process when they even, decided to talk to an intermediary to sell the company, and then what were the choices, or what was the fundamental approach that they had, the criteria that they used to go through that. So, we have a ton of data on that we find kind of day in and day out. And I will, give one example where, and this helps to connect the dots a little bit. There was a recent fund that recently closed, and we worked with them on all of their initial branding, logo development, website, all of their like startup package essentially, and help them really think through what their at the founder level, because they were going right to founders. Proprietary deal flow was their MO, and so we created a persona. Like, what is that person? And they're also very sector focused. So that's another thing I will say, just at a high level, that if you can really convince and get excited with your prospect that you really know their industry and you can really add value and help them grow their business, that is like probably number one usually that we hear from in terms of criteria and what gets them excited. But going back to this other this fund, they really felt strongly, and we helped them develop like the persona and like, what do they want to say? What is their story they're going to tell? And we really flushed that out. When I say a persona, it's like literally we created a fake name, a picture. We gave him a bio. We gave him like what he cares about. And we then paired that with the messaging. And it was done in such a way that was beautiful, because it wasn't contrived or like, oh, well, this is what they care about, so this is what we're going to be. It was organic, and it was very family focused and very like, we're going to partner with you. And we hear the word partner so much, we want to roll our eyes, but like truly like going lockstep, shoulder to shoulder with you. And, and that's what a founder cares about, because they know they're not just throwing the keys and walking away. In some instances they are, of course, but in a lot of instances, they're going to be partnering with you to grow that business, right? And you want that kind of level of support, guidance, but not in a way that's heavy-handed, that's you're going to come in and just run roughshod within the organization. They care very deeply about their employees and what will happen, as part of the transition. Those things I don't think would ever change, right? And so, yes, we look very carefully at that group's thinking and approach and what their criteria is. So, and like I said, like that sector focus is always such a strong element of branding. Not only for the founders themselves, but also, of course, the intermediaries. Like if you're known to be the person that invests in car washes, like that, you're just that's such a brand, like quick thing that you can reach out to that investor, clearly. So sector focus is really, always a key element. And as well, like I said, this partnership approach and support and like the consultancy side of things and what they can bring to the table as it relates to value creation strategies and so on.
It's interesting, right? Like I know, to your point, this buzzword or hackneyed concept of, partnership, right, perhaps feels overdone, but I've kind of had, I was spending some time reflecting this last week about how I was best able to kind of open up conversations with people. And what I started to realize was not only was it really about that partnership piece, but it was actually really about unlocking and enabling kind of business dreams in a way, or ambitions, where it's kind of like, and I know there's a lot of different reasons people, consummate transactions, right? And it can be for, I want to just completely exit. I'm done with this thing, whatever. Right. But to me, one of the unlocks in conversations is often, well, like, where do you see this going? Or like, what are your dreams and ambitions, and what do you want this company to become? And how can I, as a partner with you, help enable this future path? Right. And to me, it's part of like conveying that you are not only the one that, to your point, that can kind of help consult with them and help them uncover what that path could look like, but then the one that can be, you know, the guide and support for them on this journey as they're kind of trying to reach whatever that promised land is for them.
We actually also see that on the investment banking side when we think about marketing branding, because those intermediaries, like they're the ones like holding such an important part of that flow of company transfer, if you want to just call it that, because it's like, as a founder, you spent your whole life building this company, and it's like, you got to work with somebody who can realize that, who can realize your life's purpose, and it's like, it becomes very important in that. But yes, to your point on who you end up working with, you don't want to, you want to be able to go rough and tumble, be honest with each other, find that level of transparency, because these are your partners. Like, it's no longer just you as an entrepreneur or a business owner. You are now completely like intertwined, but you also want to still be calling the shots as the CEO. So firms, we really try to harness that idea too. Like, if that is what they do in terms of like, being in a support role, not being in a decision role. Of course they are to some degree, but we want to make sure that that comes out fully, so that these business owners, can feel good about partnering with them. And that could be the edge, that edge, that personal, like, okay, I could see myself working with them. And, that really, so it's like the days of, mean finance, people, and like, the days of KKR and like Nabisco back in, all those LBO and hostile takeover ideas. It needs, in the middle market, it's a completely different message and a completely different approach. And so it's something to be very cognizant about.
It's interesting, right? Like, just as you were saying that, you were making me reminisce on this. When I have people ask me like what I do and what I've done for the last decade, right? And like, especially people that are coming from outside the industry, the answer I've started to gravitate toward is that like, well, my job has been to get married, right? And not just to do that once, but to get married over and over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
Because like,
Yes.
in order for you to like truly consummate a transaction outside of an investment banking process, right? Like, you have to develop with that founder such a sense of conviction that you are the one for them, that they're willing to forego that, right? And like, what is that other than truly building, in a business sense, everything that you might in the way of trying to, get married to somebody, right? Like that level of partnership.
Yes, that's so true. And that takes a lot of being humble. It takes a lot of, because people can detect bullshit, as and so that always needs to be thought of. And like, and just being authentic, and yes, absolutely, you're proposing, especially for those proprietary relationships. Yeah. And I would even say, right, even if it is a banked deal and you're on a buyer's list and you're getting the sim and all of that, and then you're maybe having a management presentation, that's your one shot. And you better have a very strong message like that to them at that point in time as well, because you're competing against these other people who are doing the same thing.
I imagine that some of the elements that you talked about, partnership, family, experts in an industry, I imagine a lot of firms feel like they embody those elements, but maybe struggle with getting that messaging across in such a crowded, competitive field. So two-part question is, how do you do that effectively? And if it comes down to an inbox filled with emails, how do you craft one that someone's going to read and make them feel those elements?
One of our cornerstone philosophies is a brand strategy needs to have 3 C's. We talk about clarity, we talk about consistency, and we talk about confidence. And I would almost add another one that's not a C, but like repetition. Like you need to be, so that like consistency, but that can mean a lot of things. It's like repetition as well to the market, and ensuring that your message. And so when we talk about brand strategy, it's also that. It's also, how are you presenting yourself? And it's not just a PowerPoint. How are you verbalizing? What are you saying? Like, what are the talking points? What's your 30-minute second overview speech? Like, how are you hitting on those points that that founder cares about deeply? And so those are we're constantly trying to think through like how that is going to be perceived and communicated. And then just how it's like all of, and how do you differentiate a sea of emails? And that's, if you talk about the future of marketing in this space, I think that's, going to be a more and more sort of higher, how to cut through the clutter of email inboxes and that's and where we come out on that is your marketing shouldn't be just email, strategy, either. So that's part of it. But because yes, it's a very competitive, very loud, very almost chaotic, I think, thing. I will also say that that relationships will never, be superseded by the next marketing technique or digital marketing. Like, this is a business of relationships. And so again, using all of these elements to help, like, so if you're going to an ACG conference, for example, and this was always my go-to storyline when I first started the middle M, which was, okay, you're going to this ACG conference. What are you doing between now and the time you see this person again? Versus just picking up the phone call, like how are we staying in touch with all of those relationships that you're trying to generate, deeper relationships with to take action against in the future? What's that strategy look like? And so, and again, it's not just email. It's definitely not only a website. We always talked about a website being, kind of an island in the middle of the ocean. People are only going to come to that island if they know to, if they want to, if they're researching you or whatever. You want to be where they are. And so luckily we have LinkedIn. You can hate it, you can love it, and we do both. But at least we have a platform there socially that people are using more and more, especially on the deal side, to do research or whatnot. And so that's a place too that we try to leverage with our storylines and with the messaging and just staying in touch and using, broader communication elements and strategies to be able to do that.
You mean it should be more than a once a quarter, hey, let's touch base sort of email?
Automate it.
Especially an email that's, hey, and you got to be really careful with using like clearly AI. Hey, if they're in Boston, how the Red Sox or whatever it is, you got to be careful with that stuff too. So email marketing, I'm not saying is dead, but we got to be really careful and really deliberate about when, how to use it and what tech to use it with to understand when to actually pick up the phone then as well. So all the digital marketing side is a place where, especially on the proprietary deal outreach side of it, again, it was back in the day when I was starting Middle M, I'm like, there's such an opportunity to use digital marketing, lead gen, tracking, quarter scoring, and then having that process set up so that, people are taking action. They're doing things that are going to score them. And that's when you pick up the phone. Again, these are more cold relationships, but like that is something that we're seeing more and more of now, people asking us for. So that's really good news as well. People, understanding and seeing that as an opportunity.
All different pieces of the puzzle, right? And email, calling, conferences, announcements for deals. When you think about the different, I don't know if you call it content or channels, could you rank them for which pay the most dividends? I suppose like a wholesome, all-inclusive approach is what you'd recommend, but anything that you've seen lately?
I don't think that there's any one thing. We are seeing more and more ROI on LinkedIn. We're seeing a lot more engagement. We're seeing, and we're being smarter about the type of content and the delivery of that content. Molly, or one of our team members, is very in depth in the latest strategies of LinkedIn. We help our clients think through about how to leverage that platform as much as we can. I'll say it once, I'll say it again, which is investment on the PR side of things. So making sure that you're in the Axios, which a client of ours today was in Axios for a transaction, or whatever it is, Wall Street Journal, PE Pro, and, all the media relationships that are announcing what you're doing, is a loudspeaker to the market. So we see a lot of ROI there. Talked about thought leadership, and people tend to think, thought leadership, white papers, this and that. It can be very straightforward. And that's something that we offer our clients and are very turnkey. We've figured out that process and do a very good job. There's one on the investment banking side client. We do probably 15 pieces a year. And they're sometimes they're published in media publications and that. And as well, though, thought leadership also really works well on the PE side of the house as well, to generate interest. Oh, that firm is investing in exact businesses that I'm in. Why don't I just reach out and have a conversation? That happens. And that happens on an inbound basis with the right pieces, strategized in the right way. But I really just want to emphasize the fact that what we do for our clients, the range is really dependent upon their strategy as well. And so it's hard to say, okay, that's the highest, that's the highest. Well, we can look at it on a client basis, or again, and in some instances, if they're really focused in one sector, then we can double down in various publications in that sector, thought leader, so that will have very high ROI as well.
Got it. So you're not advising everyone have a podcast? Every private equity firm have their own?
No, unless they're really passionate about it and they're consistent with it and it's clear in terms of the message, all the brand elements. But a lot of times it sounds fun and they get into it and then it kind of wanes. But we are doing more and more video content, like short form, almost TikTok style video content. And that's where LinkedIn is investing some of their investment as well. And that can be really simple, straightforward. So when I said so video can be done and it doesn't need to be this high production. In fact, we kind of shy away from those big projects. I mean, we can do them, we've done them, but where we're seeing video today, it's just what you can get on the iPhone with the right graphics and the right presentation, the right editing. We can do a lot with something simple like that. Imagine a BD person at a private equity firm, talking, hey, we just made this acquisition. This is why we made it. We're super excited. Congratulations we're so looking forward to working with you, founder X. And that's a quick hit video that's shared on LinkedIn. That would get a lot of views.
There's before Dan, there's one firm I'll shout out that I think does a good job with this. There's a firm called Montage Partners that does a video series with their founders of their portfolio companies, and it's like a matchmaker. It's got that game show that they used to have, and they ask questions to the founder and the partner who led the deal, how well they know each other. And it's it's gimmicky, but it makes it the real people, and you can see that come across clearly.
Love that. It's such a great storytelling arc too. We're always looking at how to bring a brand to life through storytelling. And, case studies can feel old and stodgy, but bringing it to life like that. And that again, addresses that key question that the founder may have, which is, what is it like to work with a private equity firm, no less than this particular private equity firm, and because you're always going to be up against the brand of private equity, right? The brand, private equity. What do people think of private equity? Do they even know what that means? How do these firms work? So you have to tell that story in the context of how your firm sits within that environment as well, and why you're different, and kind of addressing those questions that people may not even know to ask, or they may just subconsciously what is this? And they're confused. And so they don't even know what questions to ask. And so you're kind of you're anticipating those and you're coming at it head on. And that's where that confidence comes from, like the 3 C's of confidence, like being really confident in why you're different and having that really shine. And that montage example, exactly what I would say there.
Well, it's interesting, right? Like it's all in this context of humanizing your firm and humanizing private equity, right? And I know, like we've talked about a lot of great things you can do there. Like I think that was a great example, like the montage example. You know, a little bit of video here, some other thought leadership there, whatever. But actually, I wanted to take this even a step further, right? I was. It's funny. I was reading this post the other day about how the author was arguing that how B2B marketing is kind of going the way of B2C marketing in a lot of way, where the true decision making ends up being based upon kind of likability and uniqueness and, you know, of the personality and the expertise of the person conveying that or the brand that's conveying that. And it was even, you know, it was exemplifying things like, you know, how the Geicos and Allstates of the world have their kind of geckos and, you know, mayhem characters, right? That it's really just around the idea of building this kind of personality or face of the firm that really sets the tone, and that can end up being and will end up being the main decision maker for this. But I guess that the question I had for you, like thinking about that sort of context and thinking about how this is evolving and thinking about the importance of, you know, humanizing and having that face of the firm and all these sorts of things, like, is there merit to private equity firms building these kind of personalities or, like, you know, face of the firm sort of approach such that they can truly humanize this? Like, is that the way this is going?
I will go back to my primary point, which is it really needs to be authentic to the firm itself. But to answer your question, first of all, high level, yes, I think private equity needs to become more humanized. It needs to get out of the realm of confusing financial maneuvering, engineering, you know, that come in and slash costs. So I think bringing it down to a human level and showing real examples of how private equity's investment is really helping X, Y, and Z, you know, whatever that storyline is. But I do believe that, and especially if you've got somebody within a firm that's like loves to be in the limelight and like wants to be the face of the firm, that's a natural extension of like really harnessing that character and that voice, that energy to and amplify that as much as possible, that brand element and amplifying it. So yes and no. Like I can definitely see areas though where firms want to stay, you know, maybe it's a sector that's a little bit more professional or buttoned up or whatever the case is. And they, you know, their brand is a little bit more. So I just want to stay true to who they are. And that's what a brand is. It needs to be authentic. And you wouldn't want to overlay something that feels not in alignment. And so I do think that the humanization element definitely is a trend. Storytelling is a trend. We're seeing, you know, the example I shared earlier, which is like the family, you know, this one particular firm really wanted to highlight the family values part of it. And so I think values-based, you know, being more value-driven is another key theme we're seeing more and more of. So it's like a humanization and some values as well, which are linked, you know, it's more touchy-feely in a way, but it's bridging the gap between this, what is private equity to, oh, this is a new way of how businesses are growing and leveraging capital in today's market and, you know, making a lot of money too, doing it. You know, a lot of these company owners are making a lot of money. So it's a good thing, that part.
Yep. I wanted to ask you to maybe give some advice here. If we took you out of Middle M, maybe put you back in investment banking, or if you were starting your own private equity firm, from a talent perspective, how should firms think about marketing, BD, and building those teams? Like, is it enough to have a BD person who is, you know, interacting with Middle M and kind of outsourcing? Should folks think about bringing on a marketing person to both work on their firm level marketing and work with portfolio companies? What have you seen that's worked?
So, again, we've had the privilege to work with a brand new startup firm and, they were investing, in my opinion, in the right areas. So if I were doing it, I would think of it as a business, right? And those are key elements to any business. Like, how are you going to present yourself? What are the key messaging? How are we going to really differentiate ourselves? Who's our target market, right? So really thinking specifically about where, of course, that's more of an investment consideration, but like, how are we going to deliver our message and what's the market opportunity? So I do think from a standpoint of, so I absolutely would invest heavily in BD, no matter if the strategy is proprietary or intermediary driven. I think a BD person team, I would be very, very focused on leveraging all the tech that's out there and how AI, would play various roles in that strategy. So the answer is, and I would also be thinking about what the story arc is, right? And again, going back to the brand and like positioning and differentiation and what we're not versus what we are, trying to be as clear as possible, which is, really Middle M's whole point, right? Is like very, very targeted in a market, not being everything to we even don't, so to the extent of like, you would think that from a business opportunity for Middle M, like we could be working with all the portfolio companies of our private equity clients. And we forego that because, again, that's not where expertise lies. We truly believe that sector expertise lends incredible value to our clients. And so we can't do that at the portfolio company level. We just don't know manufacturing as well as we do know private equity. So I would, be very clear on what we're not, what we are. And to your question about, and I know I just referenced marketing at the PE level for Middle M, but if I was starting a firm thinking about the investments and how I think it's just marketing is just one element, right? You're going to, I think in this day and age, the playbook is value creation strategies and like how to deploy the right people, the right resources to the situation at that company level. So yeah, I think and that would be exciting. And of course, you hope that you can raise money fairly quickly too in today's market.
Is there a place where you're starting up a firm, or you're building a firm and you say, you know what? I'm just going to invest in marketing instead of business development?
I would think that unless, you're on the investment team and you're really passionate about relationship building, but I think you need somebody that's still on the ground, traveling to conferences, meeting with people face to face. A marketer could do that, but I think that's more of a BD function just generally. So I don't think you can forego that, in my opinion. But you may want to invest more heavily on, a tech stack that makes more sense to help build your pipeline of BD opportunities versus, picking up the phone and cold calling or doing some more outdated modalities as it relates to marketing tactics.
So the perfect setup, it sounds like, is it's a blend of marketing, BD, technology, right? Like having the right combination of those factors to truly drive sourcing.
Yes. Yes. And I don't think just one marketing is such a broad, like, we kind of just talked about it, but in terms of like all the things we do, but that's still just the tip of the iceberg as you think about marketing, generally speaking, especially if you start talking about consumer facing marketing or whatnot, meaning a marketing professional can only do so much on that one person's shoulder. So you always, as you grow, which is why, again, when a firm works with us, you're getting a team. You're not just getting one person. You're getting a team that comes in and can get whatever it is done in a very effective and efficient manner. So I always have to keep that in mind too. And that's not a shameless plug. That's really because people think, oh, just hire a marketing person. They can do all the marketing. And that's just not true. From whether it's graphics design, whether it's email creation and like the tactical execution can get really complicated very quickly. So that marketing person is going to need more resources.
It's a lot to put on one person. And there's so many parallels to how you're talking about marketing and I know it applies to BD, but to just the questions I'm asked about business development, there is no one size fits all way of hiring for BD in private equity. It really is informed by what your investment strategy is, i.e. what companies are you trying to go after and what are the important channels for you to get them. So marketing is built into that, and who you hire, who you engage to help you tell your story. It really depends on the details.
Lockstep. Marketing and BD should be lockstep with each other, which is why, again, we find our most engaging clients are that they have a BD person that's who we're interacting with mostly to help them become more effective. And like, yes, what are the channels? Okay. And that's a back and forth. That's a tactical conversation. And then out of that comes like really refined strategies that make sense for what they're trying to do.
Yeah. So there's no one size fits all for hiring for BD or marketing, but there is a one-stop shop for all things marketing and private equity, and that is Middle M. So thank you, Joanne. That was a great conversation. A lot of interesting stuff that our listeners, I think, will really engage with.